Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Breeze, Breezeway Productions The Breeze. And we are happy to kick off our coverage of this year's 2023 edition of the Tribeca Film Festival. We have our first filmmaker that we are happy to speak with today. We have director and writer Olivia West Lloyd on the show to talk about her film, Somewhere Quiet. How are you, Olivia?
Good, good. Thank you so much for having me.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Tell me a little bit about the film that's in the festival this year.
Right. It's the film Somewhere Quiet imagines what might happen to a final girl in a horror movie, sort of like after her film has ended, sort of 6 to 8 months later, she's trying to reconnect with her regular life, and sort of like how she tries to move back into normalcy, following a sort of intense traumatic experience. And she sort of finds that the horror hasn't really ended, but rather sort of changed shape and become more of this like sort of interior and subconscious horror. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. When I was watching it, there were times when I felt like I wasn't sure if she was awake or really experiencing it, or not experiencing it,
Yeah.
if it was in her own head, and that kind of replays over the context of the film. And the character that suffers from this is Jennifer Kim, who plays Meg. And since you wrote this film and that you were kind of showcasing her character and developing her character when you're putting the script together, where did that influence come from to see of like a awake or not awake aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I was really interested in this idea of sort of fear, and how fear sort of can change the way that you interact with the world, and sort of how much it can sort of seep into all of your relationships, all of sort of like all of your actions, all of your behaviors. And yeah, I mean, this is a person who is just kind of like trying to white knuckle their way through this like really intense experience. She doesn't really want to do the doctor thing. She doesn't want to do all the sort of like, therapy stuff. She's very sort of like interior. And I think the awake and asleep stuff is like it's all sort of stemming from this idea that she's like sort of locked down so hard that like things are starting to sort of like seep out along the edges, and she's starting to sort of like, the harder that she tries to close the door, the more it's like finding a way to sort of like bleed into her sort of waking life. And we get this sort of like fusion of nightmare and reality. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And I was also always curious whenever I see something that's shot in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. I like to ask where was the middle of nowhere? Where did you find this
Right.
cabin where a lot of the film takes place? Yeah.
It was in Katuitt, Massachusetts. It's in Cape Cod. I'm from Massachusetts, and I grew up going to this small town on the coast, since I was a little baby. And we would go there in the summer, and it was this like, glorious, happy experience. We're like, biking around with my cousins on these like little dirt roads, and it felt like, so free and so wonderful. And then it was like we always had to go back for Thanksgiving because my grandparents were there. And I remember it being this like really strange thing in my head where it was like suddenly this place that had been so happy and so joyful became this kind of like terrifying place, because it was like sun's going down at like 3:30. It's like ice cold. All the leaves are off of the trees. Like the trees that used to be sort of so lush and like welcoming and friendly, suddenly they become these like very stark things, and you can see really far into the woods. And that sort of,
Yeah.
as a sort of like anxious and imaginative child who had a lot of like sort of scary imaginations, was like a big part of my memory of being there. It was this kind of like the flipping of this like happy place into being this
Mhm.
place that was like terrifying. And so that was interesting to me in terms of like sort of, we talked a lot, Jen and I talked a lot about the character of Meg having sort of no safe harbor. And this space, this like summer town in the winter felt like a good sort of larger imagination of that same feeling of like, this should be a happy time, but like it just feels sort of inexplicably wrong to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety that all of the characters experience when they're up
Yeah.
there, and Jennifer's character Meg just wants to get out for so much of it, where she just feels so awkward. And one of the main sources of her awkwardness is a character that shows up, an actress who is in your film that we've seen a few times. That's been on our show. When we went to Sundance, she was in a couple of films, and Marin Ireland is in
Yeah.
your film, and she plays like the creepy sister that comes in, or a
Cousin.
family member, so it's
Yeah.
cousin, the cousin that comes in, and that she talks about her family history. When you're putting that together, script wise, did you have something like that to go on with a family history of heirlooms and traditions and stuff? Because that was really creepy.
I definitely like drew, from different parts of my family, of friends' families, of like all sorts of different things. But yeah, I was really interested in, I mean, in a film that is sort of about how the past infects the present. Like, Jen's character is very much, suffering from this PTSD. She is sort of trapped in this past feeling and can't sort of escape it. I liked the idea that like this place also felt really arrested in time, that this was like a place where people were sort of clinging to a past that is sort of larger than life, that they're sort of imagining this kind of like storied aristocratic history that like is perhaps quite overstated, and we never quite understand like what level it is overstated and how much it is like a past that belongs to them and how much it is like an imagination of their past.
Hmm.
So I was really interested, yeah, in that type of like sort of how history sort of like bleeds into our present and how it affects us. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you definitely put that out there on paper, and it was showcased by your characters. I did have a lot of anxiety watching the film. Also,
Good.
wait, oh, good, good. People that are on edge, or that you want them on edge in the theater, obviously, if you get that reaction, then the director did her job of making sure that you were scared or nervous, and learning about the family history, because I really enjoy learning about the backgrounds of people and the history of things. Like social studies was one of my favorite subjects when I was in high school, and I always love learning history and things like that. So when you go into that in the film, I like that aspect of it. Okay, so the film Somewhere Quiet will be playing at Tribeca. Do you know when the film will be screening at the festival this year?
Yes, we are premiering on June 8th, and then we're screening again on June 9th and 14th.
Do you
So
know which theater that it's going to be at? I'm going to be having the links below so everyone can go and check it out if they're interested in this project.
yeah, I believe the 8th is sold out, but there's still tickets for the 9th and the 14th. I think the 9th is at Angelica, and the
Okay.
14th is at the AMC on 19th Street.
Okay, very
Yeah,
good, very good. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me today to talk about your film, Somewhere Quiet. Thank you, Olivia West Lloyd, for coming on the show, The Breeze. And once again, I hope you're able to check out Somewhere Quiet at the Tribeca Film Festival this year.
great. Thanks so much.